AI company CEOs like Sam Altman and various politicians and political commentators on the left recently started talking about a new welfare policy idea called universal basic income. There are several studies of this proposal, and frequently even the very modest results are grossly misrepresented by the media. This story is surrounded by a huge amount of lies and leftist propaganda, as expected. For example, in a study ran by Sam Altman's team himself, the intervention group actually performed worse than the control group. Yeah, in a sense that they have accumulated less wealth by the end of the study. Um, However, this outcome was buried both by the press release of this group and by the mainstream media covering it. The explanation, I would say, is quite simple. Universal basic income suffers from the same problem which plagues all welfare programs, despite the claims of the pioneers of this idea. It essentially de-incentivizes you from escaping, the miserable state which you're in, the miserable state of your life, by making this miserable state slightly more tolerable. That's how it works. um, However, the details of these particular studies and the media coverage of them is not the topic of today's video. I will attach a link to a good review in the description. Today, I would like to talk about the effect all the studies disregard just by construction, by design, which at the same time is crucial if the idea would ever be scaled to the whole country. Um, I will try to explain why the proposal is not just bad, it is actually fundamentally dysfunctional. I'm talking about the impact of UBI on the economy as a whole. All the studies followed a small group of people who were given a modest amount of money, like around $1,000 per month. Um, in this setup, the backreaction of this intervention on the economy is completely negligible. In other words, prices are not going to rise because of that, and the participant just enjoyed extra amount of goods and services at the expense of everybody else, right? Um, this would not be the case during mass implementation. If US Treasury will start sending every citizen $1,000 check in an envelope every month, monetized by the Fed, the prices will be affected. So does this mean it's just basically a wash, though, nothing changes? Well, no. According to the standard logic of money printing, it is always a resources redistribution scheme. In economics, it's called the Cantillon effect. But from whom to whom the resources flow in this case? Usually, the people who are standing closer to the money printer benefit the most, as they get to enjoy the goods and services for the old prices. In fact, the prices themselves, they rise exactly due to these people purchases. So, however, in the UBI proposal, it seems like everyone is at equal distance from the money printer. So, is it a wash after all? Well, still no. Let's look closely. Whoever spends the dollars faster wins at the expense of those who spend their dollars slower. In other words, the currency is getting destroyed for the purposes of the storage of value. Yet nobody would want to hold dollar-denominated assets on their hands anymore. However, if the US dollar remains the only acceptable legal tender, every person would have to keep some amount of it for everyday life transactions. And if the person is poor, it will be a high percentage of his wealth. So as you can see, the idea which was supposed to help the poor people actually wrecks them. Now, there is one important lesson to learn here about how people's philosophical positions impact their political views. If we start from this effective altruist standard, or I don't know, whatever this tech CEOs and leftist politicians have, of bringing the highest number of goods to the highest number of people, probably something like that, I don't know. It takes a non-trivial knowledge of economics, or maybe some we'd call it common sense, or some analysis, to conclude that capitalism actually satisfies it. And the ideas like UBI do not. While if your starting position is rational egoism, you would arrive at the ideas of capitalism more easily and directly. Because I would say almost no rational person would think that forcibly extorting wealth from others for the personal use is actually in their own best rational self-interest.